Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Noah's Ark. In 2022, scientists with various institutions in Turkey, such as the Istanbul Technical University, began the hunt for Noah's Ark. Experts began excavation work in an attempt to reveal once and for all the legendary vessel Noah built at the behest of God. You know the one he needed to save 2 of every animal and the human species? The tale is as old as time, told in the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. Academics specializing in geophysics, chemistry, and archaeology studied an area in Turkey's Agri district on Mount Ararat. According to the Bible, this was the mountain that Noah's Ark came to rest upon when the floodwaters receded. Researchers have been prowling the area since 2003, but they have yet to find irrefutable evidence of the mythical ship. Other than the story in the Bible, what makes them think the Ark could really be buried here? It's all about a natural structure sandwiched between the villages of Telsakar and Uzengili. Looking at satellite images, the structure looks exactly like an impossibly huge boat. It truly looks like on the side of the mountain, a boat has been buried under layers of sediment. Whether the boat is there or not, that's still up for debate. But there is no arguing that there is indeed a boat-shaped feature on the mountain at the exact place the Bible says Noah's Ark landed. The search for the Ark began a very long time ago. Some of the first field studies were done in 1829 by Johann Jacob Friedrich Wilhelm Paris. He climbed the mountain hoping to find the timbers of the great ship. He didn't find them, and neither did the scientists when they conducted their most recent study in 2022. But they did extract sediment from the formation and are hoping to learn more from that. Only time and more thorough excavations in the future will reveal if the Ark truly is buried on the mountain. What do you think? Could this be Noah's Ark? Let me know in the comments below. Number 9. Blackbeard's Treasure. The legendary pirate Captain Blackbeard, also known as Edward Teach, terrorized the Caribbean in the early 18th century, and in doing so accumulated a significant amount of wealth. He was killed in 1718 and his wealth vanished with him. 300 years later, and it's still a mystery. Is there a map lying around somewhere with an X that marks the spot? Or is the pirate's booty nothing but a myth? The disappointing truth is that Blackbeard had so much treasure it was likely impossible to put it in a real-life treasure chest. Although his ledger gave him a wealth of about $12.5 million in today's money, experts think his real cash was never documented. It might be scattered about the Caribbean, or it could be at the bottom of the sea. In the weeks before Blackbeard was finally captured, he knew the end was coming. The Spanish were trailing him, the British had it out for him. He didn't have much time left. It isn't that far-fetched to think he may have buried his treasure across a handful of islands. One of the most promising places is somewhere on Plum Point. When Blackbeard was briefly pardoned, he attempted to live a normal life. He set up a small home on Plum Point in Bath, North Carolina. Many think he buried the true bulk of his wealth somewhere in the area. Treasure hunters have been digging at the ground with shovels for years, but no gold has ever been found. Between 1717 and 1718, it has been estimated that Blackbeard ransacked about 30 ships. His onslaught took him near Antigua, the Grenadines, Martinique, and many others. He could have treasure stashed on any one of the islands, but nobody has ever found a piece of it. Do you have any theories on where the treasure could be? Number 8. The original crown jewels. Lincolnshire is a rural region in England, mostly consisting of farmland and soft flowing rivers. It's also situated along the border of the North Sea, which pulls water from the rivers out into the ocean faster than a galloping horse. It was in this flat and ancient landscape that the original crown jewels were misplaced in the year 1216. When I say crown jewels, I'm talking about the British crown jewels. The ones most people are familiar with are the new ones made in 1661. But the original jewels were lost 800 years ago by the infamous ruler Bad King John. John was the son of King Henry II and the brother of Richard the Lionheart. He's most famous for signing the Magna Carta and for ruling during a particularly violent time. In 1216, John had already been King of England for 17 years. He had rebellions in almost every part of his kingdom, supported by the kings in Scotland and France. The rebels were trying to destroy him from within, while the Scots and the French kept invading. It was as John marched to confront Scottish King Alexander II that he lost the jewels. He tried to cross Lincolnshire on the coast of the North Sea, what was back then known as the Wash, but he misjudged the tide at the estuary. Before John and his army reached the other side, they were stuck in quicksand and tidal whirlpools. He lost most of his baggage, including a stash of jewels. Some think they were the first crown jewels, but there isn't much information about them before the 13th century. Nobody knows what was lost, only that whatever it was very important. There is a man currently spending a lot of time in Lincolnshire trying to locate the lost jewels. His name is Edward Morris. Well, that's the fake name that he gave the reporters anyway. He managed to locate a single rusty object buried under about 4 feet of wet earth. But that's all he's come across so far. He's still out there all the time with his metal detector and shovel, scouring the marsh and quicksand for any hint of treasure. Edward isn't the only one who's become obsessed with finding Bad King John's lost jewels. In the 1930s, a rich American created the Fenn Research Company specifically to find the treasure. In more recent years, Walton Hornsby of London hired a traditional diviner to magically find the jewels, but so far, nobody has located the treasure. And now for number 7, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Alyssa Cariopa and Pal4204 for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and join the Origins Explained family. Number 7. The Yanganates Treasure. In 1532, Inca Emperor Atahualpa was captured by Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro. What many people don't realize is that the Spanish victory came on the back of a civil war that had been waged between the emperor and his brother Huáscar. Pizarro took advantage of the division already inside the Inca Empire to topple the whole thing. While the emperor was imprisoned in Cajamarca, he offered Pizarro a massive sum of gold to be released. The Spaniard accepted the deal. Gold was rushed from all over the empire in order to pay the Spanish to leave. The man in charge of delivering the gold to the Spanish was Inca General Ruminawi. The Spanish learned that the general was coming with 750 tons of gold. It seemed too good to be true, and the Spanish believed the Inca were planning a surprise attack. So Pizarro strangled Emperor Atahualpa to death and then burned him at the stake. This marked the beginning of the end for the Inca, and Pizarro never did get his gold. Ruminawi supposedly ordered the entirety of the treasure to be hidden in an unspecified area of what is now Ecuador. That area is modern Yanganates, a mountainous region in the peaks above the Amazon rainforest at an altitude of between 8,000 and 14,000 feet. It's near what is called the Avenue of Volcanoes, where the world is a harsh and volatile place. Despite the hazards of the terrain, people have been coming here to search for the lost treasure for 500 years, starting with José Valverde 50 years after the death of the emperor. He was the first bishop of South America, who supposedly found enough of the treasure to make himself rich, but nobody has seen a piece of that gold since. Number 6. The Desert Ship. There is a legend in the American Southwest of a ship stranded somewhere in the desert. There are multiple legends, to be fair, all about maritime vessels that became lost in places like the Colorado Desert of California. The most famous legend came around the days of the American Civil War. Whispers of a Spanish treasure galleon buried under tons of sand somewhere north of the Gulf of California. How could a Spanish galleon have gone from the ocean to the desert? It all has to do with floodwaters. The earliest tales of the stranded galleon started being told after the legendary Colorado River flood of 1862. Colonel Albert Evans reported that he saw the ship in 1863. The Los Angeles Daily News even reported a half-buried shipwreck west of Dos Palmas in 1870. That's 40 miles north of Yuma, Arizona. Those who saw the ship said it was visible from miles away. But because the area wasn't very well mapped at the time, nobody was able to detail its exact position. and before anyone could pillage the ship of its treasure, it vanished underneath the sand and mud. Scientists think the Colorado River flooding in the 17th century could have created the perfect environment for a Spanish ship to get lost. The ship would have sailed up the flooded river, then got stranded when the floodwaters receded. It could have happened a few times and was never recorded. This would explain buried ships in the desert full of lost treasure. There is one fairly reliable account of it happening in 1615. Spanish explorer Juan de Iturbe was the victim of a high tidal bore. The tide carried him from the Gulf of California into Lake Cahuilla. He was eventually forced to abandon his vessel because there was no way out. The ship was filled to the brim with a fortune of black pearls. Juan walked to the nearest Spanish settlement on foot, and nobody ever saw his treasure again. Number 5. The Last Shogun's Treasure Chest. From between 1603 and 1868, Japan was ruled by what is called a feudal military government. The Tokugawa shogunate dominated all of Japan and its islands, starting with Tokugawa Ieyasu and the Battle of Sekigahara. The clan ruled from the fantastic Edo Castle, which still stands within the Tokyo Imperial Palace. They ruled alongside the daimyo, the samurai lords. Most of the shogunate's money came from income tax. Commissioners were in charge of taking care of all the finances. They collected cash from merchants, they took money from shrines and monasteries. All of the riches were sapped from big cities like Nagasaki and Osaka. Even the famous Sado gold mine had to pay its taxes to the shogunate. Then things started to go wrong in the late 1860s. The Edo period came to an end with the installation of the Meiji government. There was a divide between the shogunate warlords and the new imperialists. An alliance formed, and in 1868, the shogunate was officially overthrown. There is a legend that states before the head of the Tokugawa clan was defeated, he took all the wealth collected over 200 years and stashed it. The treasure was buried somewhere on Mount Akagi in the Gunma prefecture. There was so much treasure that it took over 1,000 men to bury the wealth deep within the mountain. Then they were all killed so that nobody would find it again. In 1941, the New York Times reported that a treasure was discovered in the Akagi Mountains. Someone dug 220 feet deep and pulled out gold and trinkets. But this may not have been all that correct, because since then, nothing else about it was ever written. Other than the brief report by the New York Times, there has been no historical mention anywhere of someone finding the shogunate's hidden wealth. Or maybe they found it and kept their mouth shut. Number 4. The Temple Menorah. In the Hebrew Bible, there is described an artifact of great importance. It's the Temple Menorah, a candelabrum with 7 branches. It was used in the tabernacle and in the Temple of Jerusalem starting around the 10th century BC. It served as an important symbol of the Jewish faith and Judaism as a whole. It was the jewel of the land of Israel, and to this day remains their official emblem. The Bible says it was made of pure gold. The lamps were lit only with fresh olive oil, but then disaster struck. First Solomon's temple was plundered and ransacked by the Babylonians in the 6th century BC. Then, after the Jewish people built the second temple as a replacement, it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. The Roman invaders stole the last remaining menorah, the Temple Menorah, and took it back to Rome. At Rome's Arch of Titus, the thievery of the menorah can still be seen today. The Romans commemorated their triumph in a massive work of art. What happened to the Holy Menorah next is a mystery. It was reportedly taken from Rome to Carthage after Rome was destroyed by the Vandals in 455. Ancient historian Procopius wrote that the Byzantine army came across the menorah about 100 years later and took it to Constantinople. Then it was returned to Jerusalem, but it's nowhere to be seen today. The problem is that starting in the 6th century, all of the records get very fuzzy. There are no indications that pilgrimages were made to Jerusalem to see the menorah, but it may have been stolen in 614 by the Persians when they sacked the city. Legend has it the Persians melted the temple menorah into pure gold and then used it to make jewelry. Others say it was lost in a shipwreck. A particularly persistent rumor is that the Vatican is in possession of the holy relic right now. It's supposedly kept beneath Vatican City, way down in the cellars of the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran. The Temple Menorah probably did exist 100%. Between historical records and depictions of the treasure in the ancient world, it must have been a real item, but it seems to have disappeared. Do you think it could be the Vatican keeping the treasure for themselves, or was it destroyed? Let me know what you think in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 3. The Great Bell of Damascusetti. In the 1400s, Myanmar was a much different place than it is today. A former Buddhist monk was in control of the country, King Damascusetti, who ruled from 1471 until 1492. Under his leadership, the Southeast Asian kingdom reached the peak of its golden age. Many beautiful creations were made, and there were many advancements in society. One of the greatest things to come of the prosperity was a relic called the Great Bell of Damascusetti. According to the legends, it was the largest bell ever made. It was about 20 feet high and 13 feet wide, cast from 294 tons of metal. Metals, including silver and gold, covered across its entire surface is an indecipherable language. The bell was taken to the great gilded stupa called the Shwedagon Pagoda, which survives to this very day. Some historians think it's the oldest stupa in the world, but even though the stupa is still around, the bell is long gone. Somebody managed to steal it. In the 16th century, the Buddhist kingdom began a steep decline. Europeans showed up, first as settlers and then as conquerors. Portuguese warlord Felipe de Brito e Nicole did some serious damage in Myanmar in the 1590s. He sacked the cities of Siriam and Pegu in 1599. Felipe even instituted himself as the governor of Lower Myanmar. It's believed that Felipe was behind the theft of the Damascusetti bell in 1608. It was so heavy that it had to be rolled down the hill and then hauled away by elephants. It was even more of a challenge than the warlord had anticipated. As it was being transported along the river, its restraint broke and the bell disappeared under the water. Felipe de Brito and Nicole was ultimately impaled on a wooden stake in 1613, but the bell was never seen again. That's not to say nobody has looked for it. Most recently, deep-sea diver James Blunt scoured the bottom of the river on over 100 exploratory dives. He found shipwrecks, but no sign of the bell. Because of its weight, experts think it could be under over 25 feet of mud. Number 2. The Amber Room. In 2021, a report was released by researchers who found a secret network of tunnels at the site of the former Eastern Army HQ of Nazi Germany. The previously undiscovered system of subterranean corridors was uncovered in Poland. Those behind the discovery described it as the biggest find ever made at the headquarters. This was where Hitler's army had their main base in Eastern Europe. It would be the perfect place to discover the lost Amber Room. A researcher from the local museum said many of the tunnels have been filled. It looks like they may have been collapsed on purpose to hide whatever it is they lead to. Experts are struggling to remove the material just to make it safe enough to explore the underground network. The Amber Room was one of the most important treasures of Russia prior to World War II. It was created in 1701 by a German sculptor named Andreas Schluter. The plan was to adorn the walls of a room in the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin with amber panels. That was where the King of Prussia, Frederick I, was living at the time. The amber was installed in 1716, then shortly after presented to Peter the Great of Russia as a gift. The whole room was deconstructed, put in the boxes, and taken to St. Petersburg. It was then installed in the Catherine Palace. Then, during World War II, the Nazis stole it. Over 6 tons of amber worth, at face value, around $500 million. But historically speaking, the Amber Room is priceless. A rich collector might pay the debt of a small country to own the treasure if bought on the black market. The Amber Room has not been found inside the mysterious tunnels yet, but it could be down there somewhere. Maybe it's buried under many feet of rubble, stashed in ancient crates. Then again, a completely different research team also uncovered a shipwreck around the same time in the Baltic Sea. They claimed the shipwreck could hold the pieces of the Amber Room. It's like every time somebody finds anything mysterious from World War II, there's always a secret hope that the Amber Room will be there waiting. The Nazis did something with the Amber Room, but nobody knows what. Ever since 1945, people have been searching for it. Most people think it's in Poland, though nobody knows where. The Russians were so sour about losing the Amber Room, they built a replica at the Catherine Palace. Number 1. The Temple Treasure. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered by a pair of Bedouin shepherds in 1947. They found a couple of ancient manuscripts hidden inside pots in the caves above the Dead Sea. Over the years, 800 manuscripts dating back 2,000 years would be discovered in the region. One of the most fascinating is Scroll 3Q15. Most of the Dead Sea Scrolls were written on one of two materials, either paper or leather. But this scroll was written on a sheet of copper. It was found in the back of a dark cave, a total anomaly. It's the only Dead Sea Scroll of its kind. Written on the solid copper sheet is an ancient treasure map. It contains 64 entries describing where to locate hidden treasures of unimaginable wealth. Professor Richard Freund called 3Q15, aka the Copper Scroll, the most important of all the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was found in 1952 and has been under hot scrutiny ever since. Some experts believe the scroll is not a real treasure map at all, but a story from Jewish folklore that is poorly understood. Others believe the scroll contains directions to the legendary treasures of the First Temple. Objects like the Ark of the Covenant, the Temple Menorah, and other biblical relics. Not just relics, but also 174 tons of gold and silver. The issue is that the instructions are based on places that haven't existed in 2,000 years. Despite significant intrigue, researchers have never been able to find even one of the 64 buried loot caches. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing lost relics do you hope will be found? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon for more videos from the channel. See you later. Bye!